I'm here to see her. I've never seen you. Yes, I know. Well, there was one. So now I don't know, like, yeah, so like, it costs once you get right. Well, we just talked. I don't know. Oh, I didn't see it. So that's. So I so it's like well, we all got the call.
We're on a date.
Well, I think it was. It is. No, really? Yeah, it's nice. Definitely sore. I died. Sunday was now I'm hoping to finish the whole thing by after the chair. Get into stuff. That's what. Friday. Yeah, it's so nice to be out there.
Every day.
Well, there's a lot of, I don't know. She's great. She's absolutely great. I don't, yeah, I've seen some of those complaints pop up on her. So this is AOS and we're the one that's really nasty on her. She's
And then that'll clear up the next question.
Okay, I think we should call to order at 5:03 p.m. And we'll just we'll begin with confirmation of board member attendance and voting. Gail Marshall.
Here. Not voting.
Teresa King.
Here, am I voting?
Yes.
Yes, I'm voting.
Brian Hinkle.
Here. Am I voting here?
No, I think
No.
these three are.
Jamie Whitehead.
Here voting.
Okay, Dwayne Bolt's not attending. Robin Sue, I see you're here and voting. Marie Yarborough.
Here voting.
Lily is absent. Patrick Skate.
Yes,
Yeah.
voting.
John Bench.
Here voting.
Okay.
Oh, so this is-
Susan Allen, are you voting?
I got that one.
Okay. John Eisenhower, I don't see. Like, Bo Lively is absent. Okay, I'm here voting. Carrie Hayes.
Here voting.
Rogers is absent. Eliza Bishop. Here voting. Okay, Jennifer Vanilla. Absent. Okay, Gary Burr.
Here voting.
Kristen Farley. Okay, Darcy's absent, says, Aaron Brown. I see, he says he's going to be here, but I don't see him here yet.
He was polling anyway.
Okay. Okay, Tammy, you're here, and anyone else in the outer islands that's attending or voting. A variety of vouchers have been going around. Hopefully you have been signing them or not been signed. Is there any public comment? Anyone here for public comment for this first public comment session? I don't see none. So we have minutes to approve. March. Is there a motion? Who's the second?
She can be second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, we will move to reports and updates and the superintendent report.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to April. It's like the sun is out and it's warm in here with windows open. That's a different scenario. Enrollments for up to this month, as a district, we're at 1395 total. At 499 of those students are high school students. We had 5 more students from a month ago. So 4 of them were high school students, numbers increase, and the others were in the elementary school. COVID update, our numbers over the last 3 weeks, I would say, have been dropping. I think 3 weeks ago we were at 9, and then it was 6 district-wide, and I think last week we had 3. And then we'll see as we progress. So there's been this sort of steady decline through pools. Most of the positives have been identified through parents by calling us and letting us know. That has been the way. We had a couple of last week, most of the schools had negative pools through that. One of the things you probably heard in the news recently is that the state is going to be looking at making some changes to the whole process. There was a thing came out just yesterday in terms of the use of providing free Binex tests for all school students and staff members. And by Friday, I have to give a number to the state of how many tests that we need. And I'll talk a little bit about the use of those. So I'm going to do every single staff and every single student so that we have those. But in terms of pool testing, the state is going to slowly phase that out. The reasoning that they're giving, Dr. Shaw spoke with superintendents on Friday at the end of the superintendent's conference, the regional presidents, and then nurses had a meeting over the weekend, is that because of the variant, whether it's Omicron or BA2, that oftentimes before it's picked up through pool testing, someone may have been already carrying and spreading, and it hasn't been as effective as it has in the past. But those schools that wish to continue may continue with pool testing if they're finding it useful and a protective measure. And then those schools that wish to stop can stop, and that'll start after the break. We have a nurses meeting on Wednesday, and we'll talk about that and see where they're feeling. My guess is that nurses will feel that since it's not costing us anything and pool testing is catching some, and it gives us that by next opportunity that will continue through the end of the year with our pool testing. What the state is asking is that if you are continuing with pool testing, that you only use your Binex for people who are symptomatic, whether that's staff or students, or you're using it for those positive pools, and that's it until the end of the year. We've been kind of flexible in the use of those Binex tests to make sure that we are checking on folks, and they might not be symptomatic, but let's say they were a close contact, and so we've been allowed some flexibility in that use, but that's going to get tightened up. In terms of the free Binex tests, depending on if your school is going to stop pool testing before the end of the year, or if you're going to continue, every single student and staff member will get at least 5 individual tests. So they'll be packaged as a group of 5 to be used either for the remainder of this year, or we can hold them and use them for next year. And again, we'll make those decisions with the nurses on Wednesday in terms of how we want to use those Binex tests. And there's a sense that that'll be a better measure. Let's say we come back in the fall and then pass out tests to everybody to be able to use them to see whether or not that you know, they're COVID, if they're having symptoms, so you know whether it comes to school or not. The SOP will be discontinued at the end of this year, barring any changes that may occur. But that standard operating procedure will drop away. The tool that nurses and schools will use will be the communicable diseases framework that they're using. That's where that 15% came from in terms of absences. We've had 2 schools in our district that hit that 15%, and it wasn't because of COVID cases. It was the stomach flu and regular flu virus, but not COVID virus in terms of hitting that. And so nurses were versed and reminded that, so that'll be what we will use in terms of whether or not schools will close and what our response will be. So that all was fast and furious over the weekend, and there's still some things that are tweaking out. And then as soon as we meet with the nurses, then I'll share stuff you know, with the community as a whole, especially when it comes to the use of those Binex tests and how we think they would be best used. I'll stop there if anybody had any questions on that, because that's a lot to digest.
I'm also assuming that it'll be a fair number of people who will just decide not to,
Could be, yeah, they could take the tests or not.
or yeah, it'll be optional.
It will be an option, yeah, with the Binex.
Extra ones or whatever.
All right. Update on just sort of collective bargaining. As I said, Bar Harbor is complete, and we're continuing to work with the MDI support staff. They've had some changes in their support person through the MEA, and so that onboarding has been taking place. And then we have a meeting set up at the end of this month after vacation to be able to sort of get things back started, and hopefully we'll be able to wrap up by the end of the year. School visits. I've been to Mount Desert and Bar Harbor, Swans, and Cranberry. I've been to Cranberry more times than any other school, and you would think that that's not the case, but with their meetings on Fridays and their town meeting, it's been interesting that I've spent a lot of time there. And of course, the high school, and I'm sure Matt will talk a little bit about it, but I had a chance to participate a little bit in the social responsibility day that was held here with the focus on racism. I opened up the family night for the movie showing. Unfortunately, there weren't as many people as I would hope to be there. There was probably about 10 folks there, and there were some board members, but there were some family members from the high school that were there to watch prior to what their students would see the next day. I had written a little speech and everything. So I still got to say it, but I didn't get to share it with as many people as I wanted. And then that next morning, they had the historian here to talk about the railroad and why am I forgetting? The Underground Railroad.
Story, yeah.
And
Cohen, Anthony.
Anthony Cohen. And he did a wonderful job. And I had several people come up to me, talk to me about the students' responsiveness to listening to him. It was probably the first time that they were in a large auditorium all together, focused on one thing. And in general, people were impressed with not only Anthony Cohen's presentation, but the kids' ability to watch and be a good audience after almost 2 years of not having that experience. And I thought overall the day went really well. And I don't know if people saw the news clip from News Center Maine, which I think is channel 2. They were here and did a little news piece about it that I thought was really good. Budget updates. I sent out a note to the MEA. We got our insurance premium in. The maximum that they were going to set for any school was 8%. We came in at 4.53, and as you all know, we budgeted 10%. So that kind of helps in terms of our budgets with carryover. I'll come around at all of our meetings this week and sort of talk a little bit about it, about that. So you can look at how you want to handle that. Typically, that would go into carryover for next year. Also, it would support any changes in plans for staff when that occurs. I think on one occasion on the floor of a town meeting, we had put that money back into the budget. Of course, that makes some really quick changes of math with Nancy, but sometimes we try to do that ahead of time just in case that happens because it affects a couple of the articles. But we can have those conversations, and I'll show everybody their individual school numbers. For a whole, as a district as a whole, it was $284,000 pretty much in savings from what we budgeted and what it came in as. In terms of budgets, as you know, the AOS has passed. The high school had its budget meeting on April 6th. We had to call people to show up to make sure we have a quorum. I want to thank those folks that came to that meeting to make sure that the high school had a budget. So, and that passed. I'm very grateful for Bill Firm to come and take the time and to do those meetings.
If we could make sure in the future that that meeting is on the board members' calendar, I think that would help.
I used to get emails about that as well. Same
I
thing
think
with
meetings are
AOS.
going to happen the hour or something that week or something.
So it's like there isn't those agendas for them because it's like a town meeting. It's like that.
I think it's, but to be able to send something out and put it on calendars, that can be useful.
I didn't notice if it made the high school,
To make the chalk talk.
chalk talk either, because, yes, it was pretty sad.
Yeah, not everybody. So we'll figure out, I'll make sure that gets out for. And then I was just going to share, Bar Harbor has their town meeting on the 7th of June. We have a bunch of those sort of coming up, but just so folks know, Mount Desserts is the 3rd of May. Southwest Harbor is the 2nd of May. Tremont is the 10th. Trenton is May 17th. Swans had their budget meeting last week and it did pass. There was some money cut out of their budget around $8,000 in terms of that budget. In terms of, there was some concern about having a more time as a principal there and what the size of the school is. But we're going to work around that and have a plan. Of course, Cranberry is already passed, and Frenchboro is still in the process of finalizing their budget. Their town meeting is usually in June as well. So we're starting to wrap them all up. Policy updates, I just wanted to share. I have sent out a note to meet with the high school student that came and presented to us. She was very busy during the time of the 1X, and I sent an email, I guess, as she's even though I thought she was really organized because she was using her phone and looking at her calendar, I might have to send her multiple emails to get her to respond. She hasn't responded to me yet.
Text.
Well, I don't have her phone number, you know, I don't have students' phone numbers. So I will follow up with her. I don't see her out front practicing every morning like I would always see her. I do have a scheduled meeting with Out Maine for next week in the middle of the week to talk with them about our policies and ways to support our students and to make it more visible. That'll be on Wednesday at 10. Also, what will be coming up is the the acceptable use policy and the internet use policy. Those were revised over the summer, and so they've already gone through a first reading, and Josh has to make some adjustments based on that, and those will be coming back. And then GBEB, which is the staff conduct with students policy that we'll be looking at and revising. And I actually pulled SACOs today to take a look at that. We'll go into the policy meeting to look at just to strengthen ours a little bit. Were you going to talk about? Yeah, I'm going to treat things. Okay, so I'm going to skip over that.
You can do it.
Oh, no, I don't want to take your thunder. No, that was a great experience. The one thing I will say, one of the things I think that's really important for principals in terms of understanding the programs that are in their schools, one of the activities that we did that morning was we actually did a Touchstones reading and discussion protocol that is used here at the high school. And we looked at Francis Bacon writing on revenge, and it was incredibly interesting on how that, and we had Pete Eaton sort of acted as the teacher with us. And so just having the ability and time to sort of have an understanding of what that experience is for students and kids, I think the same could be said for having principals be a part of any training. I went to week of math training early on with Trenton folks, which gave me a really good understanding of that program all across the spectrum. And I think that's important for leaders. No, we can't know everything, but to have a little insight on the philosophy and underpinnings of programs that we're using with kids, I think is really important. And I think that session sort of gave that understanding for administrators so that they could better advocate with their teachers in the use of that program. It was, maybe we should pass out that piece. It was pretty interesting. In terms of principal searches, Connors Emerson, we had wrapped that up, and Heather Webster, it's a principal of Connors Emerson. After that search, right now, Pematic has had its first meeting with its team following a similar process of identifying needs of the school. It's made up of board members and staff members from across the areas within the schools, so it feels very inclusive. I hope to have a principal in place there by their May meeting, but we'll see where the process takes us, and we'll be putting ads for Cranberry, Frenchboro, and Swans this week to
Not the other way.
and then we have an assistant principal at Connors Emerson to be hired, but that's one of Heather's first tests. Legislative updates. The CDS law, I don't know if CDS is the Child Development Services, and that's the organization that has been supporting infants through 4-year-olds for a very long time in Maine. It was sort of an outside organization. There is the bill LD 386 that is now making its way through, and the basics of that. So you have an update, and it is making its way through the legislature with the hope of funding being in place for it is one that SAUs will be required to provide child find, so that's seeing if a child needs special ed services, and FAPE July 1st, 2024. That whole process should be completed by July 2026. Schools within the law are not required to bring students into the building, but they will be required to provide services for those students through community providers or partnerships if they're not brought in. One of the key pieces of bringing 4-year-olds into our schools was to, be able to sort of do that. Most states do this model in terms of schools being responsible, because in the end, the kids are coming to our schools. Maine had this quasi system, and as you know, over the years, you've probably heard previous either principals or superintendents talk about lack of funding and lack of support, which is finding people to be able to do the speech services or do the OT or to do the PT, and that's still the case, and that will be a struggle even for us when the responsibility comes to us. In terms of the funding formula, within the committee, it was expressed because I was on that committee for a little while until I transitioned to this job. But one of the things that I felt strongly about is that it would have to be, especially for the special ed services, 100% funding from the state. That is still in the most recent iteration of this. It also proposed funding for 3-year-olds. Special education costs is 100% funding. And there is some part of the bill that states that until that is assured, that none of this would go forward. The key piece, and what Melissa would probably argue, is are we going to find people? And so there might be some creative conversations over the summer between area superintendents and area special ed directors and figuring out whether or not we have a regional support to be able to support those kids. We'll see. So that is one that's sort of coming down the pike, and we'll know by the end of the second session. The other bill that folks should know is, as you know, there was the COVID sick time where the state said that folks would have 15 days, and there was a retroactive date, and it was a little bit confusing, and it's still a little bit confusing. So what the legislature is doing is they're trying to clarify that previous law to say that as of, people would get this 15 days of COVID sick time from January 1st, 2021 until the end of the use of the 15 days. The previous bill had some date in it, and a lot of folks were very confused, and they even shared at the superintendent's meeting in Portland that it was very confusing. So this emergency bill to clarify would be that staff would have access to these 15 days, and everything is the same as, which kind of is tied to our current MOU. The piece that will be new for people that we will be looking at is that this also allows for folks who have to take care of their children. So anybody who was used from January 2021 and had to use some of their own sick time, because that's what our MOU said, this bill will allow, so until those 15 days are used up, then that person's done. So that will help clarify. But the MSSA is going to send some clarifying language that I will share with the business office as soon as that bill is passed. And it's an emergency bill, so it'll probably come into effect as soon as they pass it. There's also a student count bill, which basically means the averaging of years. If you recall, early on, rather than just going by this year's free and reduced lunch count to create state subsidy, the state went back to average a number of years because of the number of folks doing their free and reduced had diminished. Those applications had diminished because everybody was getting free lunch. So even though we are putting word out, please do this because it impacts X, Y, and Z, grant funding, it impacts aid from the state. The state recognized that wasn't working, and so they did this averaging, and you sort of saw the results of that is, we had a lot of schools in our district receive much needed funds to support our budget. So they're going to continue with that as long as that bill goes. There's also some zero emission bills in there as well. I sent Eric a note about some bus organizations that are doing Zoom calls about getting funds to buy more zero emission buses. There are a lot of criteria around that, and whether or not our school district meets that criteria, we'll see. It's around income, in need, and so they're, highlighting those schools that are in most need to get those funds first before there's any trickle down. And then the other one is, someone had asked me a little while ago about the 55% of state aid that the state that voters passed years ago, and the state has slowly been reaching that number. The state has been at that number for 2 years, but there's a bill out there to create a stabilization fund to make sure that the state just can't say, oh, no, we're not going to do that. So it's a way of making sure that that 55% stays in the budget. And it looks like that will pass. So it's just another support to ensure that at least the state is meeting that expectation. So those are the big bills that are coming our way that would impact us. So I wanted to make sure that folks had an update if you heard things coming along. Any questions or comments on all of those? Well, the list is really, really long of other bills, but these are the ones that of education bills. They're moving fast and furious apparently. And that's my report. But I do want to say one thing. I wanted to make sure everybody aware that this is Teresa's last AOS meeting. And Teresa has been on the MDES board for multiple terms, providing support for not only her school, the high school, and then the AOS as a whole. And I wanted to thank you, Teresa, for your time that you put into the kids and the community here on Fountain Island. So,
Thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It has been a pleasure to be able to serve all these. It's been 7 years. So I just think, thank you for the opportunity, and I've learned a lot, and it's been a pleasure to be able to be a part of this team. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
Okay, so does that bring us to Director of Teaching and Learning? That's you, Julie.
I hyperlinked the April note, and if you had a chance to see it, technology is our focus for this month's note. And I was going to close the PD offerings Friday, but I closed them today because we're full. And I'm kind of excited about this new trend we're doing here because it's making everybody read the notes. That happened in March. We had a lot of people sign up, and we had to close offerings earlier than we had planned. And now there's a quick turnaround on reading the notes, so that's good. We want to get our messaging out, and email is not always the best method, but it's one of those. Mike mentioned the retreat. We did that on the 31st, the administrative team. It was the first time we actually spent a day not talking about COVID, and it was lovely. It was truly lovely. There were 3 components of the retreat: Touchstones, which I'll talk about in a moment. Mike spoke a little bit about it. Our new teaching and learning framework, which we finalized, and then an abridged version of the Art of Coaching Teams training, which is what nearly 40 of our teacher leaders have been trained in March. So first, beginning with Touchstones, yes, the reading was cool and it was fun to play student, but more importantly, what I would like you to know is that Touchstones is really gearing towards teaching 4 skills, and it's participation, how we get everybody to participate, even the quiet ones, how we cooperate with each other, how we actively listen with the intent to understand, and then how we share leadership. So that is what we mean by civil discourse. It's not a debate of ideas, it's an exchange of ideas. And it's a very specific process that we all experienced, and then debriefed in terms of those 4 pillars. So the intent on that was not just to do learning, it's more of a kind of a rebranding and a remessaging, because we rolled this out during COVID. And we've had varying degrees of success because, it was introduced on Zoom. we were, you know, a little hit or miss on the trainings. And then our administrative team didn't even get to really understand what it was all about. So we had to just say, okay, let's start there, get a deep understanding of what this is about so that we can go ahead and support it. So I've met with all of the people participating as leaders of Touchstones readers. I've kind of re-messaged, we're doing this, let's get clear on the reader, let's get clear on problems of practice, and we're going to support with that. And we'll open with more training in August for our practitioners. So that was the purpose of the Touchstones piece. The second piece is our new teaching and learning framework. For those of you who have been around, it's like 7 years, it's called the 10 Elements. And basically it's this document that we stand behind and says, this is what we think good teaching and learning is. And it's almost been 10 years. So it was time for us to kind of go through that again and take a look. And we made some adjustments, particularly in light of new research and also in light of the equity work that we've been doing in the district. So many of you, and this is kind of gonna preview a little bit with the anti-racism task force as well. I'm gonna be speaking with them and sharing that framework with them on Thursday. They've asked us to conduct a curriculum audit, right? And in response to that, we didn't really know how to begin. Rhonda, myself, Becky Lehman, and Jill Cohen submitted a team of 4, that's all you could submit, to the Maine Curriculum Leaders Association cohort. It was called the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Curriculum Audit program, and it was a year-long program. It was led by Lawrence Alexander and Sando Associates. I did present on this before, so it might sound a little familiar. And we took elements of that training and brought it into the document. So you can see some influence there. You can see some influence on new things we're learning. You can see things in terms of, you know, science and brain science and how you connect with kids. And then also like this Touchstones work you can see in there. So there's a lot of different new influencing factors in it. And it's not 10 anymore, it's 8. So we're calling it the high impact teaching framework. That's not something you will see yet. You will see it soon. Rhonda and I met with the A team, finalized it, and now we're meeting in small groups with everybody in the district. So Rhonda's going to take the pre-K 6 folks, meet in small teams. I'm going to meet 7-12 folks in small groups, go through it, answer any clarifying questions so we fully understand it. Because we're also making another shift. We're doing goal setting instead of the fall, the spring. It's more natural time when people are thinking about their practice, how they want to spend their summer work in preparation for the school year. So we're doing a shift in process. Before people goal set, we want them to make sure they fully understand the framework, and we're going to do that in small groups. So the last bit is the art of coaching teams. And again, that was stuff part of our Common Study Leader launch that we talked about, filled every receipt. And that was a big question. I didn't know either. And then the high school leader. So our building principals, though, of course, had 1 million people out of building that day because they were doing the training, so they couldn't attend. So what we did is we kind of took the key components of that and replicated it for them so that they had a full understanding of that training. And also Rhonda and I are going to continue to work with the A team. She has a book and working through those components to make sure that we're continuing to support, because you don't get trained and you're good at it, you have to work at it. So that's our intent. And we're going to be supporting the teacher leaders with this work, and we're going to be supporting our own administrative team in this thinking and process. So
Are there questions for Julie? Okay, that brings us to updates from subcommittees, which as far as, oh, I missed you. Sorry, Eric. I'm so sorry.
I'm here.
I have highlighted in blue on my agenda, so I just passed right over to
Yeah. Over a few things we've been doing for the past couple of months. Really busy, let's put it that way. All right, I keep doing a lot of RFQs and RFPs for the schools. And I just know our policy is different for them. But I just wanted to let you know, just in case you don't know this, that the RFQs and RFPs are for the state. You do not have to put it in the newspaper or do one if it's under $100,000. Just to let you know, but our policy requires us to put it in the newspaper, but to do the RFQ on some of these projects that are under $100,000 takes a lot of time. So I would like to go over the policy and see what, if we can or not change it. It's sometimes it's just really cumbersome if you're just going to do $20,000 and try to figure out when you can just call up a few people and just have it done. Because a lot of people don't read the newspapers on these things. We've done some over at Trenton where it was for the walk-in freezer, and we had somebody that we called already, and then we had somebody that did read it and thought it was different, but just to let you know, those are the requirements by the state. All right, so RFQs that we've done so far are RFPs. I've gotten one for Cranberry Island basement. We've had response back for there because there's a lot of leakage water problems over there. We're doing the Connors Emerson renovation, the high school library science renovation, and we're also getting ready to do the phone system, which we've got some response on that too. These are the other ones that I'm working on to do. We got a boat for Cranberry Island, paint all the schools out there, repair. There's an old firehouse building out there. We want to see if we can repair it or tear it down. My opinion right now, I'm hoping we can repair it. One of the reasons why, once you take it down, to get it, put it back up, it's going to cost you more to put it back up. So, there's windows at Pentatech, portable classroom I'm working on for Tremont. The garage over at MD Elementary School. The slides we got in just this week for the slides for the playground. So those will be going up. We got a gentleman that's doing the gazebo now for Connors Emerson that's happening. We had to do a big lead test for all the schools. I'm still waiting on a couple more schools to finish that up. That's got to be done by May 22nd. PFAS, the only places that we had to do a PFAS test was at the high school and Tremont. And those are done, and we're just waiting for the results to come back on those. Stop me if I'm going, I'm trying to go fast. Right now, I'm doing research on things that's required of me for requirements for asbestos, safety training for the buses. The buses should have twice a year. They should be showing the kids. That's one of the issues. I know some of the schools are doing it, but you're supposed to train the kids on the safety on the school bus to know the exits and how to get out and all that stuff. Training for the custodians. They should be trained on certain items that I'm going through Mimic right now, the insurance company, and they're going to be showing me certain things that they recommend that we should be trained on. Ladders, fire extinguishers, and some things you don't have to be trained on every year. And of course, like I was saying, local policy for our RFP and RFQ. All right, big item. Okay, you guys, I don't know if you've seen the news this morning on busing. Busing, they're having, especially they were showing down by York. We are having that same issue here. We're getting people, drivers, and I'm using a lot of van people, and it's getting tough. Okay. We have bus drivers that have been driving here for over 30 years. It's really amazing. I think they all do a wonderful job and getting the kids back and forth. We have no spare drivers. We have, I got an example here that if we have one driver out in certain schools, then we have to try and see if we can use the vans, or we got to use the parents, ask the parents to bring the kids to school, or one bus will pick up all the students and then they're gonna be late to school. That's, we, like all the other schools, we're hurting, and we gotta figure out something for this, or else we're gonna, I don't know how the kids are gonna get to school, to be honest with you. And we're talking about pre-K and stuff like that. That means more drivers or more something to have people pick up these kids. Okay, we do have one person that's interested in driving, but it costs $2,500. But the state is supposed to fund it. There's a community college that is offering driving courses, and they're supposed to pay the $2,500, and they're waiting until May to see if they get the funding. So that's what one of the things that we're hopeful for, at least that part. Because some people, you know, have a hard time. Yes, Tammy?
Well, regarding that, is there any more funding in case we could find someone else that would drive?
That I don't know.
Yeah.
This is the only funding I know right now that we have. Okay, before I get to the next call, well, I'll go down there. And this is one of the things too, you know, I've checked with some other schools, and like I did last time for the sub drivers and compared and did a matrix. I'm still working on this part. You know, bus drivers do a lot of work. Sometimes I know everybody says, okay, we know they do a lot of work, but I just am going to point out some emphasis on some of the things they do. They make sure the bus is running in good condition. They disinfect it. They have to go through a physical every year. If they don't do the physical, they can't drive. Okay? They also randomly do drug testing on them. The other thing is their hour works. They go from 6 to 9 in the morning, take 5 hours off in between, come back. They start at 2 to 4, 2 to 5. Okay, and think of the safety they're doing for the kids. You know, sometimes it could be up to 70 kids on that bus, and trying to keep them calm and stuff like that. Okay, also looking for, you know, they're looking for the traffic. So when the kids are getting off, they're looking all the way around, plus the student getting off the bus and getting back on, whichever way we can see it. And then they got to be punctual. Go ahead.
I think the thing is, I don't think anyone would disagree that we think bus drivers should be well paid and perhaps paid more. The problem is that they're in a collective bargaining agreement, so they would have to be put into a separate category, or there would have to be something. It's not as simple as just saying like, well, we should pay bus drivers more because they, you know, we would have to reconfigure our steps and lanes and how, and our work and how classifications go within the agreement. So I don't think anyone doesn't believe that they're doing all these things or should be paid well. And so it's just the complication of figuring out what that would look like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And I would say there's the added complication of, like Bar Harbor is different, you know, there's the SEER bus contract. So I feel like if we're not going to be super specific about, it's really hard to throw that into the mix because it's like there's different, like, are you talking about like the contract that Bar Harbor has with SEER? Are you talking, like, what exactly are we talking about? So if you don't have the specifics, I'm still speaking. If you don't have the specifics, I think it makes it a little more complicated for us to really negotiate that topic right now without really getting into the details and the specifics of the SEER contract versus the you know, the way that the collective bargaining agreement that Jessica is talking about. It's just making it seem as if it's one group of folks isn't really doing due diligence to the very intricate ways that we have to set up, that we have worked with bus drivers over the years as employees or uncontracted employees to negotiate agreements. So that I would just submit that.
I'm not going for this. I'm not looking for you guys to sit here and say, give them a raise or anything. I'm just passing on information. That's all I want to do is just let you know what they go through each day and why we're starting to lose drivers. We just lost one today. So I'm just letting you know that this is an issue and we got to figure out something. I'm not telling you guys today that you vote on this or you say we're going to do this. I understand there's collective bargaining. I'm just giving you information. That's all.
And I guess I would just say,
I'm concerned. I'm the director, transportation director, and I'm just going to show you the concern I have for these guys, these people, and what they go through. That's all. It's nothing else. Whether Bar Harbor does something or these guys do something, I'm not looking for that. Good.
Do you think that more hours for some of these folks would be helpful? Because I've been saying for years in Tremont that
I'd really like to see us have an activities bus after the regular runs. I'd like to see that from the high school as well. I think a lot of our older kids sometimes are recruited to drive younger kids at the high school, and they don't necessarily have all their hours so that it's legal for them to be driving younger kids. And then it's also just really difficult for parents who work when, you know, my daughter gets done with tennis every day at 4:30. Well, I work until 5. So, you know, there's it becomes an equity issue that some kids can't participate in certain activities because they can't get transportation. So-
That is a big issue. Yes, it would probably could do that. But again, what time does that end and what time does the bus get back? You know,
Right.
Whatever they're doing.
So, you know, I've always thought if there were after the elementary, then another run went out at, you know, 4:30, 5 o'clock or something like that. It might add another couple hours, and it doesn't have to be just an individual town. It could be a larger, like there's one west side activities bus, there's one east side activities bus.
Yeah,
So,
there's a lot of, it'd be nice to brainstorm to see what we can do to help, because I'm telling you right now, the amount of drivers you have, and some of them are ready for retirement, and we're just gonna keep losing them. And that's what I'm just voicing my opinion on.
Sure.
Not my opinion, but my concern. Okay, I'm not saying that give them a raise here right now, I'm just showing.
no, I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you think that
That's
giving them
possible.
more hours
Yeah.
would be a way to help them be paid more, because if they have more hours, then they're gonna get
They
paid
can
more.
do 40 hours instead of 30, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, also going through a lot of notes, going through things through the state. State requires that any new vehicle, actually, all not new vehicles, but we should be having a two-way radio communication between the bus and the school. Our problem is right now is high school has no radios. The buses, okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is that you have the outside towns, Tremont, all those schools, they can't seem to cross over into the other towns with their radios. So what happens right now, what I'm doing is we've been in contact. I called Acadia National Park. I talked to the rangers there and talked about a tower. Then I talked to police department in Bar Harbor. They're working on something, and also with Brown Communication. We're also got a meeting sometime in this week with SEER to see if they can help us, or they're talking about putting a tower up, possibility for us to help solve some of these issues. Just to let you know. So it's very hard right now, and it's a requirement that we should be thinking about getting that done. And it's the same thing with what you see here also is the video. Every time you buy a new bus, you have to have at least 4 cameras inside the bus. Okay. And what I'm trying to push for is to have the rest of the buses that are in our fleet also have cameras, which will help not only the students, but help the drivers as well. And also the issues that we're having with cars just driving right past the lights on the vehicle. All right, this is the software. What I've been doing is the routes, setting up the students, the drivers, the buses, and also setting up some reports. This is software that's from the state that's free. This is what it looks like for one of the bus routes that goes through Bar Harbor that have been setting up. There's going to be over 30 routes that I will be setting up. You have to do this one by one, what the student is, or who the student is, where they live, where they get picked up, where they get dropped off, and so on. One of the other things that has been a little difficult was setting this up is the data itself. These few fields here, I had over 400 at one point. I'm down to 100. That here, I have to go back. We got to research to find out what's the number of the house. There is no numbers on some of these. Some of these is confusing between whether they're in Old Town or Bar Harbor or something like that, and that's another issue that goes on.
So.
Yep.
But people move, so if it's that hard to set it up, once,
Once it's there,
I mean, people aren't static. We get new students move in and out, people move, like how workable is it if if it can't be flexible as
It's
demographic.
flexible. In other words, once I get the address, let's say that's 1 Main Street or whatever the street is, right? Then it's there. So if a student moves out, that's there now, then I know that where that student lives. It's not only that, it's new houses that are coming up that aren't on the system right now, that we have to figure out where that house is. But once it's set up, then it's set up. It's just getting it done. That's all. So if you have a person that moves from one location to another, what this software does is, let's say John Smith is lives at 1 Main Street, but he's going to his grandparents, being picked up or dropped off. We can set the system up so we know where that individual is being picked up or not. Always at the grandparents, and maybe in the afternoon they're dropped off at the
Right, no, I understand. What I'm saying is from year to year, you're gonna have a whole different cohort of students. So,
Yes, you are.
yeah, it's gonna
But
be that.
not
hard.
as, not
Yeah.
400.
Yeah.
I'm hoping, we're, it should be down to like 50. You're always gonna, understand it's never gonna be 100%.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. You're always gonna have to work it, monitor it, and be able to keep it going. All right, there's 2 portions. The last time I talked to you that they have out there that I would like to purchase. And it's called Wayfinder. This one here is a turn-by-turn voice guidance. What it is that we have bus drivers that have to substitute for another driver that doesn't know that route. This is like a GPS where, you're gonna go from here to Bangor and some place up there that you want to go to. This will tell you you're picking up John Smith, take a left or right, and so on, and then they're at their door. And then you drive down and it picks up Mary, and then it picks up Terry, and so on. So that's what this is for. And the other one's called Stopfinder. This one here is an app that would go on the parent's phone if they participate in it, and it's also a secure app where if you want to know where the bus is it 10 minutes down the road, 5 minutes down the road, this will let you know. You communicate back and forth. I know we have some problems with areas that are don't get a good Wi-Fi or whatever, or GPS. That's what I'm hoping we will figure that out as we go along.
So this and the previous slide are both paid supplements to
It's a
the
one-
paid software.
Yeah, it's gotta be, these pieces have to be bought, and then you have an annual fee.
But the basic software is free. and-
Yes, the basic software is free.
And
This
it-
is, yeah,
mapping.
I'm sorry. Rob.
And that includes like the mapping and the directories. Cities.
Because one of the problems I'm seeing more and more is that if I take a driver from one route, put him on another route, he or she does not know how to get there. That's it.
Thank you.
Yes.
So just going back to the route slide real quick. You said that you have one route in, that you've only mapped out one.
No, I
I'm
mapped
trying to
out about
understand.
5 routes right now. Yeah, the one I was just showing you was just a Bar Harbor, one of the routes. That's it. I got 5. There's gonna be another 25 because you gotta figure you got the AM and the elementary, then you got the AM high school. And that's about 30 routes that we do, including vans that we do also.
So, but I guess what I'm asking is there's no data back yet from like optimizing routes because we don't have the routes in to optimize.
Correct, right? Yeah, I have to get pretty much all of it, and then we're gonna optimize it and get it, see where we can cut down or better do the routes.
Do you have a sense of when this route software might be live, like you might actually be using it?
Using it September. Okay, what I will be doing, and I did have a couple other notes here, is that I'm starting the 25th. I'll be taking bus rides with all those bus drivers. And they're also going to tell me certain things that they feel needs to be done, or even though this will take this route, I'm just going to throw this out, may say that it's a one-way, so you can't go down there. So I have to make sure I redirect it. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I've already seen on a couple of routes already where it can be improved. Seen that just on two of them. So.
And then when that process is done, we might have a sense of the extent to which this reorganization would help with the efficiency of the buses in terms of capacity,
Yeah.
and therefore with the need for bus drivers.
I understand too that some of this, because we do need bus drivers, I'm using a lot of van stuff right now. Because I don't have bus drivers, I pulled in some people that we know, like Butch Bracy, that used to be the head custodian here. He's doing some van driving because we run out of bus drivers, and I need to get the students back and forth to school. Yeah.
Sorry, just one other question. You keep repeating the need for bus drivers. Do you have any thoughts about or ideas for solutions, suggestions?
Some of it's pay, some of it's trying to figure out the 5 hours. I'd rather do a brainstorm with a lot of people because I'm not the only one that's going to be able to understand everything that we need to try to solve this. You know, maybe we just have bus drivers split up the days. I don't know. Because some of them say I can't do anything between 5 hours. And it's being a toll on them. So. Any other questions?
Eric. So, okay, this brings us to updates from subcommittees, which middle school and reorganization have sort of been on hold while we've been letting Mike get his feet under him. I think we're getting ready now to sort of get relaunched on that in the next few weeks. And anti-racism task force has been meeting, and Julie can jump in, or Aaron. I think largely sort of trying to figure out a sustainability plan, like how do we plan for the summer, like so that it can transition into the next year, and how do we create pathways of communication that work well where everyone. I know I feel like I've repeated this since the last time, but this work is ongoing, so that people know who does what, and we can be efficient in how we target our advocacy, and kind of looking at what are, some of these are like really long-term projects. They're not something that happens like, in some ways, like Julie could report to the task force and be like, and I'm still doing professional, like a lot of this stuff, a lot of these aren't bullet points that you accomplish in 6 weeks or something like that. So it's sort of like that ongoing nature of the work, and figuring out how to have paths of accountability, but also be realistic about what this kind of institutional change looks like, that it happens in all these little ways at every different kind of level, and budget creation, and then professional development training, and then all these other little ways, and kind of wrapping our minds around how we pursue that most effectively. Is that?
Yeah, and I think, this curriculum audit component that's now integrated into the high impact teaching framework, where you'll also see tenets of anti-racism language, will also, I think, be more clear that everybody's words are going to now come out in documentation. And so I think that that's really on our next agenda for this group, for everybody to see it. And but it's really representative of collective work. So the other item I would add is the task force leader representative, what do we call her? Kate Muzzine? Co-chair, thank you. And I do meet regularly, and she has asked me to sort of say, well, what could I use in terms of their support? And I have said I would love support in recommending how to do the training for the opening of school. We do have a required training scheduled. It's 2 precious hours. You only get 2. I think people are under the assumption that we're training all the time. We are and we aren't. There are required trainings everybody has to attend, and then there's volunteer stuff, and then there's different offerings, and then ongoing work. So there's just different places. This is the one place where you have a captive audience. So if they want to work with me, and they're going to bring that up Thursday. So I'm speaking ahead, sorry.
You,
Yeah.
the co-chairs, and
I mean, regularly, well, every 2 or 3 weeks, Kate and I sit down and just sort of talk about work that we were doing, and some of the things that they're hoping. We've talked about, the training and, looking for, I'll be sending out a new support for principals or some of the things that would be helpful for them. And so,
I think that covers it. Other questions? Okay, that brings us to the very exciting discussion item of integrated pest management policy. I know you were all on the edge of your chairs.
I'm waiting to talk about it.
I know Susan was.
Yes.
And so,
I did find it interesting, and that it's a nice shift.
And really one of the biggest changes within that is identifying that when schools are not in session, that notice shall be made by posting signs, and you don't have to do some of the things that you had to do. So it's just sort of clarifying the posting process when identification needs to occur within schools. A lot of the pesticide work is done, over the summer. And so if you were walking in the school, then you would see the signs. And so our policy just needs to shift to make sure that it's meeting what the state is telling us that we should be doing.
look to everyone. I mean, this is the first
This is
reading,
the first reading.
so we'll bring it back next time as an action item, but I think it's probably ready to go unless there's any pressing concerns about this. Okay, I see no comments, so we'll bring that, if you think of any, let us know, and we'll bring it back as an action item next time. So that brings us to the second readings of policies, which we will take action on about the admission of resident and non-resident students. You will remember that we had a discussion about this last time, and we
If you recall early on, part of this policy was sort of simplifying some of the terms, but still recognizing that idea of what residence is. And just a little thing that I learned, that second paragraph on residence means a bona fide residence. That comes out of an Ohio Supreme Court case back in, I believe, and it's used by states pretty much nationwide as sort of trying to make that definition. However, if you, for example, what makes it real difficult is if you have a divorced household and you have two families living in two different units, and how you work through those definitions. There was a case in the 90s that helps define that. So, residency is not as easy as it seems. But I think this policy still, keeps us within the law in terms of its definition. It outlines what forms that folks need to make sure that they bring. One of the things that we changed the last time was making sure that we identified those as bulleted pieces of information, because they were kind of buried in the earlier draft, to make sure there was understanding of what it is that parents need to do with that initial residency. And so we took a look at it at the last policy meeting and feel that it's ready to go.
Is there any discussion, or ideally to go to our correct format, what we would do is have a motion on the floor and then we would have discussion. And then, yeah. Oh, go ahead, Gail.
No, I was gonna make a motion, but I'm not voting, so.
Oh, okay.
Make a motion to move both
JFAA and JFAB.
Any discussion? Is there any discussion? Sorry, did you have your hand up, Jamie, or?
I was just asking her a question because I missed the last meeting.
Oh,
I wanted to read. I just had a question. There's two changes I noticed from the previous policy. One, the tuition was eliminated for staff members.
That would be, JFAB, yeah, Jamie, that was taken out.
Okay.
And then the section F was the piece that the policy committee had put in, that persons who are actively employed within the AOS, that they would be able to have their kids attend the school where they work. Part of that discussion was a recruitment piece. I had reached out to the MSSA, and it seems like, and I think I shared this the last time, that either schools are doing it, whether they do it through policy or collective bargaining, would be the difference. But probably the majority of schools have that kind of language in terms of having students attend if their parents are working at that school.
It was tough in tuition anyway. It was $250 a year. So,
The other thing that I noticed was taken out was the, there's in the previous policy, tuition students are expected to meet the same academic, extracurricular, and behavioral standards and are subject to the same disciplinary procedures as resident students. Why was that removed?
I think that is still in there.
In the current policy, it has the former one, requirements for entry, so like immunization, all those things, that's in there, but the behavioral standards, everything is not.
For resident students or
For the non-resident students. The new policy, admission of non-resident students, the last line before on the second page is all requirements regarding age, health examination, immunizations, blah, 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 blah. That's still in there, but there's nothing about that they have to follow the same academic, behavioral, everything else.
If I may, I think when we were in policy committee, it sort of, that applies to all kids, whether they fall under this or not. So I think that's why we decided to.
Yeah, under B, it does say behavior, cooperation, suitability of programs shall be considered. Under B
For admission.
Yes.
and readmission.
An assumption that,
Yeah,
that's, I mean, not just an assumption, it's a, whatever you want to call it, it's a fact that it's, not something you have to see, but, so, can we call it for a vote? Okay, all in favor of accepting JFA A and JFAB? Okay, is there any other business? Okay, future agenda items? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I have three things.
Yeah.
First, an easy one, I think. Do we know the last day of school? And do we know whether or not,
Yes.
like, Bar Harbor has to make up the COVID days and all that?
Right now, the last day of school for students is the 14th. We had 2 snow days, the last day of school for teachers. I'm still waiting on word from the Department of Education on the waivers for the 2 schools that had the 2 days. So they're providing them, so it's just sort of a matter of time.
Okay, so the 14th right now is the last day of school.
The for students.
Unless those
the
other 2
14th, unless we have another snow day. I don't see. Did I just, sorry, Marie, yeah, I probably should have.
Like on the record too.
So, now you know who to blame. My faux pas. So barring any concern, the state has been providing for those. I have been asked if I was going to ask to waive the snow days. I'm not. I'm trying to say we're back to normal, so we make up our snow days. So that's
All right.
And as soon as I get the letter, I will. let you know.
Second thing is, it's something I've been thinking about for a while, and I have no idea even if this would be something, or even how we would go about it, but I feel like our chairs of our board do a lot, especially Jessica at the AOS. Is there any way that we can discuss about increasing pay for our chairs? Maybe at a later date. I feel like it's a full-time job, especially for Jessica. I'm not saying that the other chairs don't do their share, but just something to throw out there. I don't even know how we would go about that. And then I want to talk about minutes. And I just approved, I raised my hand and I approved the minutes because I was gonna bring this up at the high school because I noticed something at the high school, but then as I was sitting here, I thought, well, maybe I should look at these ones a little bit more carefully. People voting when they're non-voters or making motions when they're non-voters.
Yeah.
And the 3 sets of minutes tonight, the 2 for high school and here, there's quite a few.
Times where.
Right.
So we tried to go back and
So-
try to read and have the person who was a voter make a motion to fix that, but I guess it didn't, that didn't.
Well, all 3 sets tonight have issues.
They have
but-
issues in that way.
Yes,
Okay,
and-
we'll try to attend.
So I'm just not sure how we fix that or if we do.
So
or if we
maybe
don't
what I
wanna-
should do is I should remind people to only make a motion if you're a voter at the start of the meetings every time.
Okay.
Maybe a suggestion, I mean, we have this setup here, maybe just the people who are voting sit in the inside ring and then we have the rest of us sit in the outside ring. No? You know, I mean.
I have a really silly way to do it.
Yeah.
Most of us have like, why don't we just make sure we have a pack of sticky notes with us when we come? And like, you just say voting, so we can all remind each other, not voting, no, yeah, or whatever, just something. Because part of it is you just, I mean, Bar Harbor always seem to vote because we have a lot of votes and everybody usually comes except for tonight. But like, it's harder if you have like a couple meetings in a week and you were voting on Tuesday, but you aren't voting on Wednesday.
You're
or
voting
whatever.
at the high school, but not
Yeah,
at AOS or
so
whatever.
I think we just need to remind ourselves
Yeah.
and whatever, I don't know, I just got a sticky note because they saved my life on a daily basis.
That's a good idea.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, if you had a plaque like normal people, we would, but we're not that fancy. But if you have a sticky note, if you put it here, that way you just have like a visual reminder, I can see, you might just, we help each
Yes,
other
and
out.
I can remember to make an announcement to
Yeah.
remind ourselves about that too. Right, that's a good.
Yeah.
We didn't pay attention to that, just
Right.
we all just, we voted, and so, I mean, we have.
Yeah.
The precedence is like, we're just now getting.
Yeah, I just don't want it to bite us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
no,
Yeah,
I'll
I
take it.
totally
I'll
get
take
it.
It's a good
Yeah.
point.
We
I'll
have
make a-
something, we
I'll
have some
make a
things that
note
we've done.
to, attend to that. Thank you. That's a good point, Carson. Hey, future agenda items, you mentioned a couple of future agenda items.
Family impact teaching framework will review.
Yes, okay. And we will have, I'm sure, continued updates on the busing situation and collective bargaining. And, yes, I'm sure we all see in the agenda what other things come up. Is there any public comment for the second session of public comment? Was there any public comment received via letter? Okay, the next meeting will be Monday, the 9th of May, 2022 here. And so I guess I would take a motion to adjourn. Okay, all in favor? Okay, great. And then the high school meeting will commence in 45 minutes, so we can all